Imagine being alone in the wilderness with your family when something enormous and unexplainable begins stalking you. This is the story of one father's terrifying encounter with what many believe to be the legendary Bigfoot. Could it be real? What would you do if you came face to face with the unknown? Stay tuned, because this chilling experience will leave you questioning everything. Subscribe now. It was a late October evening, crisp and cold, when Ben Larson decided to take his two children, Lily and Jake, on their first camping trip to Mount St. Helens in Washington. Ben had grown up in the area and remembered the wilderness fondly. He thought it would be a great way to bond with his kids, away from the distractions of technology. Little did he know this trip would turn into a memory he'd never forget, and not for the reasons he intended. The trio arrived at their chosen campsite by late afternoon. The sun was just beginning to dip below the towering evergreens, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The site was secluded, surrounded by dense woods, with a narrow creek bubbling nearby. Ben taught the kids how to pitch their tent, build a fire, and toast marshmallows. For a while, everything was perfect. As night fell, a biting chill crept in. The forest grew eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl. The three sat around the fire, sharing ghost stories, when Jake, the youngest, suddenly froze mid-laugh. "Dad," he whispered, pointing toward the tree line. "What's that?" Ben followed his son's gaze. At first, he saw nothing but shadows. Then, something moved. A figure, large and hulking, just beyond the firelight's reach. Ben squinted, dismissing it as a trick of the flickering flames. "It's probably just a deer, buddy," Ben reassured him, though a knot of unease tightened in his chest. The night wore on. By 11 p.m., the kids were snug in their sleeping bags, and Ben sat by the fire, finishing a cup of coffee to keep warm. The forest felt alive now, branches cracking, faint thuds in the distance. He chalked it up to nocturnal wildlife, but his unease grew stronger. Then he heard it, a low, guttural growl, unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It wasn't a bear, nor a mountain lion. It sounded deeper, more primal. Ben stood up, shining his flashlight into the woods. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. The beam of light caught something, a pair of eyes reflecting back at him. They were high up, far taller than any animal he knew of. And then the figure stepped closer. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark matted hair. Its shoulders were broad, its arms long and muscular, almost brushing the ground. The face was partially obscured, but Ben could make out a flat nose, deep-set eyes, and a jaw that seemed too large for its head. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He didn't believe in Bigfoot, or at least he hadn't, but there was no mistaking what he was looking at. The creature stared at him for what felt like an eternity, its chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Then it let out a loud, guttural roar that echoed through the forest. Ben's instincts kicked in. He doused the fire with his coffee, grabbed a large hunting knife from his bag, and rushed into the tent. "Kids, wake up. We're leaving." "Now," he hissed, shaking them awake. Lily groggily protested, but the urgency in her father's voice silenced her. Ben stuffed their sleeping bags and supplies into his pack, with shaky hands, keeping an ear out for any movement outside. Just as they stepped out of the tent, they heard heavy footfalls circling the campsite. The creature wasn't gone. It was pacing, watching. Ben led his kids toward the trailhead, keeping his flashlight trained ahead and clutching his knife tightly. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, branches snapping, heavy breaths cutting through the cold air. Jake stumbled, letting out a cry, and Ben quickly scooped him up. "Don't look back," he urged. But Lily, unable to resist, glanced over her shoulder and let out a terrified scream. "Dad! It's following us!" Ben pushed forward, adrenaline surging. Finally, they reached the car. He threw open the doors, shoved the kids inside, and jumped into the driver's seat. Just as he started the engine, a deafening bang rocked the vehicle. The creature had slammed its massive hand against the rear window, cracking the glass. Ben floored the gas pedal, speeding down the dirt road. In the rearview mirror, he saw the creature standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the taillights. It didn't chase them further, but its towering silhouette was burned into Ben's mind. The drive back to town was silent, save for the children's quiet sobs. Ben's hands trembled on the steering wheel. He didn't call the police. What would he say? He knew no one would believe him. Instead, he made a promise to himself and his kids. They would never return to that mountain. For weeks, Ben couldn't shake the memory of those eyes, that roar, the sheer power of the creature. He started researching Bigfoot sightings in the area and was stunned to find accounts eerily similar to his own. He still isn't sure what he saw that night, but one thing he knows for certain: some legends are real, and they're better left alone.